Hey team, it's Scott again. Let me congratulate you. You've made it. You've made it to the last module, Module 10. Some of you have gone through all of these. Some of you have skipped around based on whether or not you're trip leader, trip member, etc. Most of our trip leaders, by the way, have seen all of these modules. But I want to welcome you to the last one. This is a very important module. This is what we call our policy awareness module. Guys, when you get on the ground, there's going to be a lot of policies we want you to be aware of with our help team. And this is going to be a lot of internal policies, not only how you relate to people around you, but also how you relate to our team members. And it's really something you need to pay a lot of attention to. So go ahead and get your listening guide out, have that right next to you, and we'll go through this last and final module. And before we get done, I just want to say thank you, and I am thrilled that we get a chance to partner with you on the ground in Nigeria. Thanks, guys. We'll go ahead and go to the computer and get started.
Many of our policies are based on similar philosophy as what you're going to read in the book, When Helping Hurts, which we talked to you about in one of our earlier modules, in module number 8, what to read on your trip. So if you've not gone through that module yet, make sure that you take the time to be able to go through that module and review especially that book, When Helping Hurts. And a lot of our policies, like I said, are based on that. The help staff are paid professionals. We run that through an interview process, and they're compensated according to the benchmarks that we have researched locally. And we want to treat them as professionals, as we want them to treat visitors and as professionals as well. And so a couple of things as relates to policies on the ground, and this works all ways. Help staff are instructed and, frankly, are strictly forbidden from asking team members really from anything, money or iPads or tablets, phones, anything, shirts, basketballs. Help has we've got a formal process where the staff can request ministry tools through the administration of Help and through their various domain coordinators. So as we've mentioned before, Help has 6 domains, and within each domain we have a local domain coordinator and an international domain coordinator that work together to make sure that each domain has exactly what it needs to accomplish the 10-year vision. And so we want to be very careful not to just kind of haphazardly throw things into the mix. Tools we think they might need from a Western perspective, whether it be money or technology or clothes or whatever. And in reality, they don't need those. In fact, they could get in the way of the work from what they want to get done. So for the protection and frankly, the integrity of the ministry that's trying to be accomplished, if you see somebody that is asking for something, it's not that you're ratting them out. It's just that you're allowing us to build disciples through what we do. And so please communicate that to the trip leader, and they've got a very specific process on how they communicate that with the domain coordinators. So don't take it into your own hands. Don't try to go to the domain coordinator directly. Don't go to the administration directly. Please just go directly to your trip leader. It's not this massive offense, but it is something that we, from a discipleship standpoint, need to be in touch with our team members about on the ground. So also, you are going to be tempted on a regular basis to ask a lot of questions, and we want you to ask questions. There are questions, though, that can be very damaging, and we want to prepare you for some of those. Some of you may love to ask this question. It's the very first one here on the left. How can we help you, or how can I help you in your work? So I've got my arrow here. How can I help you in your work? Guys, if you ask this question, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you what they're going to hear generally in this culture in Nigeria. What they're going to hear is, I can get you what you need for your work. So if you ask a very simple, benign question, how can I or how can we help you in your work, be careful of not sounding overly colonial and frankly like you can do it all. We want to be very cautious of this, because what it may sound like on the other end is, I can get you what you need for your work. And frankly, guys, you may be able to get them what they need for their work, but that may not be what they need. And the people who will be able to know that best are the folks that do this on a regular basis and have spent the time to invest in those relationships. And frankly, that's the domain coordinator. So again, let the needs and the opportunities be arisen naturally and organically from the ground, from the coordinators. Try to stay away from this question, how can I best help you from your work? And I'm going to give you some questions that you can't ask that I think will be great. The second question is, what tools do you need to more effectively do your work? Again, this may be a very simple, benign question, but what it may sound like on the other end is, I can get you what you need for your work. Same kind of thing that you said or asked up here. So even some questions around it, you have to be very careful of. Third question, what is your greatest challenge? what they may hear on the other end is, I can fix your greatest challenge. So these sorts of questions, and guys, this is not an exhaustive list, but variations thereof. Make sure we're starting to develop this saying that think, and think again before you act. And so think 3 times. I know that the construction community has a saying that says, measure twice, cut once. Measure twice, cut once. We want you to think 3 times and then speak. So be slow to speak, quick to listen. That's the biblical ideal for how we should have these interactions. Let me give you some examples of some things that you would want to ask. Hey, tell me about your work. And what they would likely respond with is they're telling you about their work. The second is, hey, tell me about your culture. Tell me some things about your culture. Tell me some insights about your culture as it relates to this, that, or the other, as it relates to work or family or housing or transportation or all of these other domains. Hey, tell me about that. And kind of inquisitively coming from that angle, they love to talk about their culture just like you love to talk about yours and the peculiarity of yours. And then finally, an interesting question is there anything you would like to ask me about my work or my culture? And if the conversation turns to what you may be able to do for them, simply kind of bring them back. And so if they start to ask you questions and you feel like those questions are leading into, well, what are you going to do for me? Well, then just divert them back and be able to talk about that. But tell me about your work. Tell me about your culture. Tell me about your family. Where do you come from? Talk to me about the politics in Nigeria. Talk to me about the history of your culture. A lot of folks in Nigeria are very aware of their history, and they would love to be able to talk to you about that history. And so ask those kind of questions. But as it relates to needs and wants and all that kind of stuff, guys, just try to stay away from those. Sometimes they can be very, very daunting to overcome. And remember, we've been working about a decade on developing relationships. And so some of these relationships can be kind of fragile. And we need to be careful when we're having these conversations about these fragile relationships. We want to be able to protect and build those relationships as we move forward. Okay, moving on to our care center, our orphanage. This is a pretty strict policy we have, is that team members are strictly not allowed into the hostels of the children without being accompanied by the social domain staff member, either an uncle, an auntie, or the social domain coordinators, being able to take you into those hostels. We've got very strict protocols. Obviously, no male should ever go into the female's hostel, and no female, frankly, should ever go into the male's hostel as well. But if you are to go males to male hostel, female to female hostel, please go with one of these social welfare domain staffs or an administrator. They can take you in there as well. But other than that, we would ask you to stay out. And those are for obvious reasons, not only safety, but taking precautions around male, female, etc. So just be aware of that. That's a pretty strict policy that we have. Also, as it relates to gifts, we talked a little bit about this earlier, but any gifts that are brought specifically for team members, as long as they've been checked out through domain coordinators or administration, let's say you get the go-ahead. Yeah, bring the gifts. Okay, when you do, funnel them through the administrators or the domain coordinators. In fact, if it's for somebody within a domain, funnel it through the domain coordinators first. Very important. And if you're not quite sure what to do, then you can take it to the administrator's office from there. Another policy we've got: please don't ever go anywhere alone unless you are checked out and kind of given the all clear by one of the administrators. Otherwise, communicate, especially if you do happen to go somewhere by yourself. Otherwise, we'd prefer you go in a group. Everywhere you go, group of 2 or 3, 4, 5, it doesn't matter. But also be aware that groups too big can be a little bit, they can take a lot of attention. And we need to be very cautious culturally how we go about doing that. And when you are in a group, Westerners tend to kind of dominate social settings. And so we do need to be very careful in the humility that we present when we go into different settings, especially as a group. What about when food is placed in front of you? Guys, if it's placed in front of you, unless you get a nod off from somebody else nearby who is more experienced than you are, we would ask you to go ahead and at least try it. There are going to be some foods that look just like our foods, and there's going to be some foods that don't, frankly. In this picture, as a matter of fact, they've got what looks like a piece of pizza dough. It's not. It's a very starchy, potato-like substance they call pounded yam, and they love it. They love pounded yam. And some Westerners love it, some don't. And it's one of those things where you at least want to try it. Why? really it goes back to the biblical model of 1 Peter 4:9, and I can sum up all of our policies in this one text, and that is Peter encouraging us to offer hospitality to each other without grumbling. And guys, this is not just the Nigerian offering us hospitality. Remember, we're not going there to be served. We're going there to serve and to give our lives, not to take from other people. And so hospitality really works both ways. Nigeria is a culture of hospitality, much more than the West. And so you will get treated with hospitality, and they're very good at it. Sometimes we get into the mode where we expect to be treated that way, and yet we don't treat them that way while we're there on their very own soil. So just make sure that you take time to practice hospitality while you're there, even though it's not your homeland, it's not your place, but being courteous and humble and thoughtful and selfless, all of those things coming out of the 1 Peter ideal is how we want to carry ourselves. So that's really it. Those are kind of a high-level overview of the policies. It is certainly not comprehensive. Here's the bottom line as it relates to policies. Think for a third time, and then if you still have questions, ask before you do anything. We would rather you be slow to speak and very, very quick to listen. We would also rather you be slow to give gifts or ask how you can help, and be very quick to ask different questions and to offer different value than just what we would consider to be value on the ground. Hope that helps.